Comics are too woke, screams everybody who thinks that the comic book industry is dying due to a variety of factors that are generally all about anti social progress issues or social representation
Hmm.
that you can put under the big old banner, the umbrella term that is woke. And this is not a term that I use in my personal life um, to describe actual things, only to refer to a particular mindset. But for the sake of this conversation, I want to treat that completely seriously. We all have our individual opinions about the usage of the term woke. We can dive into that as well, because it is a loaded term and it's loaded with garbage. But be that as it may, I want to treat the idea at face value that the Western comics industry is full of people, top to bottom, who put their agendas over the actual quality and craft of the work, whether that's because they want more representation behind the scenes or on the page, or they want the comics to be political and particularly left leaning to appeal to, a certain demographic. Is that something that you guys think is really happening? And do you think that comics express too much of those general ideas? And is that too apparent within the industry?
First off, Sean, I want to commend you for being able to at least define woke much better than most people are able to.
Well, without this getting into a whole other matter, it's a word that unfortunately has a lot of relevance to me.
Hmm.
That being said, though, what are your thoughts on the
I think it's a lot of malarkey hogwash. Um, like it's it's so our comics woke is such a unnuanced discussion. Uh, I say unnuanced in the most unnuanced way. Um, it's it's dog whistling to kind of get people to be like, oh, are you guys against those lib agendas? This is the phrase I'm going to say to then signal you to come, join my discussion and then sell you a product. Um, yeah, I don't even know how to fully talk about it without like, um, yeah, it's weird because then you get into like a really political thing. Somebody else take over because I'm not sure how to direct my frustration with this too well.
All right. So I'll answer my own question. I answer this question in my mind, and I immediately have an image, which is Captain America punching Hitler in the face,
That's
right?
exactly what I was gonna bring up. Yep.
And that's from, whatever, the 40s, the 30s.
1940, exactly. Yep.
Thank you. And that is, that like political propaganda, if you will, and I'm using quotation marks when I do that, is something that comics have always had. There was a message inside of those Captain America comics, which essentially boils down to, Nazis bad, America's amazing, right? And that's great. And I highly doubt that there's anyone who can hear my voice who would disagree with that message. But yet, there are some people who would hear my voice and say that a similar kind of thing being expressed in a comic book today would be bad. And I don't understand why. That is really where I come from. I don't even care to get into a deeper, like levels deep conversation, because if you can't answer me on that level, then you haven't thought this through. There isn't a lot of difference in my mind between that and I don't know. Uh I don't think that that's less political than, for example, there being a black and Spanish Spider-Man. I don't even see that as a political statement, but
Yep.
people believe that that is. So if you think that that is, then you would have to agree that the other one is certainly more of a political statement and more motivated by a propaganda, right? Like that's pretty in your face. The only reason why Captain America was that character is because we were in the war. That's the only reason. If there's no bigger agenda.
That was literally propaganda. Like, um, I think it's people are conflating politics with identity politics, and that's why Spider-Man, who's something you and I can look towards and be like, oh, I recognize that person, right, Sean? And that we can see ourselves in that, but because now it's not the default skin that people expect comic book characters to be, it becomes a political thing because now they're shoving things down our throats is the phrase that I see everyone use. When like it's not even politics at all. That's just somebody looking different. That is somebody being more just a different person being represented in a comic book, and because people aren't used to it, they freak out.
Well, it speaks to such a long, well, when you get into it, this is political. It speaks to such a long history of only white people being superheroes, only white people being the main character of so many stories, that white people can't handle it when they're not represented and they can't see themselves in another character. That in itself is political.
That's a good point as well. And I mean, like, for me, being a black Spanish dude myself, I have definitely grown up with most of my media and the characters who I gravitate towards not looking like me. So that is just a part of my life. It's something I'm completely used to. I don't even really hardly think about it. I just enjoy who I like. It's always been sort of funky to me that that same thing that I do is not something that other people seem to be able to do. But I'm not going to get up here and say that like the sentiment behind that of like, if someone says, "Oh, I'm tired of, like I don't want Miles Morales to be my Spider-Man. My Spider-Man is Peter Parker." Yo, I'm with you. I'm completely with you. My Spider-Man is Peter Parker too. I love Miles. Miles is the shit. Miles is who I hope, if I have kids one day, Miles is who I hope they see and enjoy. But Peter's my guy, right? The thing is, I'm not mad that Miles exists. Like, let him be. He's cool too. He's cool. He's just not for me. But no, he is for me. But like, let's say it was someone else. It doesn't matter. Someone else. He's cool. He's not for me, but there are people for whom he is for.
Yeah.
And that should be okay.
It's ability to like empathize, because that is somebody's Spider-Man. And how cool is that? Like, how cool is it to have your own Spider-Man? That's awesome. And being able to be like, all right, somebody else can feel that good feeling I have. That's great. Instead of almost trying to grasp at it and make it in a very selfish way about yourself.
People also have this idea that like progression should stop when you reach a certain age. Like everything that happened progression wise is cool until you reach a certain age, and then everything should be crystallized. For example, the main character of the Terminator franchise for the first two movies is Sarah Connor, a woman. No one cared. That was cool. 20 years later, they make a Terminator movie in which the main character is a new woman, and everybody is saying that the Terminator franchise is woke. How could that be that it is now woke, but it wasn't before when it started with a woman? You were cool with that because you were a kid back then. But then when you become a certain age, everything is crystallized, and that's the only thing you can accept. It's like Green Lanterns are fine. Hal's fine. Rayner's fine. Gardner's fine. Stewart's fine. But Simon Baz, Jessica Cruz, Joel Moline, woke. Huh?
It's so funny that Marvel's ethos being the world outside your window is woke, is political. It just, you want your superheroes to exist in the real world and exist as close to you as possible, unless they're black or a woman or gay or transgender.
Because it's the way that you would interact with the world that's outside your window. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna walk outside and I'm gonna enjoy the world outside my window, but that street right there, I am avoiding like the plague. And if anybody from that street walks over on my street, I am walking away.
Yeah.
But moloids, I understand. Like,
Yes. Well, because someone is dealing with that. The
Sure,
Fantastic
sure,
Four are
yeah.
cleaning that shit up.
They got
Those
the white
are
people
nasty.
on it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. But there's another aspect to the wokeness idea that I also want to tackle, which is the idea of political political content within the books, situations that have a political end to them or bend. Civil War being an example. Civil War is a story that is largely about superheroes battling each other and what is the right way to superhero in the world. But they use a very political backdrop because the government is involved in that. So that becomes a story that is about politics, right? And people say that that type of stuff should be kept out of comics, that superheroes should do superheroics, and that's it. They should fight villains who have grand, big plans to take over the world, but no one should ever really be trying to say a whole lot, right? And again, ignoring that Captain America exists and, that Wonder Woman exists and that there have been all these situations that have occurred in the comics that feature political issues. Where are you on that spectrum of are there topics that comics should avoid in order to keep them fun and not political?
No. Here's the thing. There is a comic out there for everyone. And to just say with a paint with a wide brush that comics in general should not be political is just a misunderstanding of what art is. Art is inherently political because it's created by a person with a set of beliefs that whether or not they even mean to will be in the art. Sure, some could be a little more, you know, that more, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for here? They can decide to put that in their art as well. But it will always be there. It's inherent in art. But like, if it's something you don't agree with, just read something else. Like there's something out there for everyone. So I don't understand the idea of like politics shouldn't be in comics. It's been in there since the beginning. If you haven't figured that out by now, you don't really understand comics.
To answer the question, no. To echo Tyler, if you don't like it, don't read it. But I also think that there is there's a sophistication to books that have that political bent that I think that sort of makes people think, and it adds layers on layers on layers that goes beyond this guy punches that guy. Who's right here? Who's in the case of Civil War, are you with Iron Man or are you with Captain America? It's a deep, layered, nuanced conversation that there's not totally a right answer to. And it puts that in your face. And I think I can see how that would get tiring after a while, because especially when something like Civil War, that book happened, and then the stuff that came after it was awesome, and it happened for a long time. And then the stuff that came after it kind of kept trying to do that same kind of thing, but less, with less nuance and with less conversation and less talent. less quality. Um, so you know that that those politics that were in that the broad meaning of politics have sort of been whittled down. It's been thinned. So it's not as satisfying.
Talking like diminishing returns, just from
Yes.
themes just being used constantly.
Wow, 2 words would solve a 20-minute explanation.
But I like how we're talking about Mark Millar as nuanced.
I mean, it was. I mean, he had the
Sure.
backing of, so many other people, but.
Yeah, I feel like ultimately, if you are a person who has been reading comics for some time, you should know how to carve out a pull list that works for you. And there shouldn't be such a thing as, oh, I'm tired of all this in my comics. Because you can curate your reading list to the point where you never see anything you don't want to see. I read the exact comics I want to read every single week. I don't see anything I don't want to see. Unless it's for the show and like I have to or whatever, but just like my personal books that I want, I curate it, as you should too. I don't understand the people who seem to be unable to avoid things that they don't want to engage with. Now, me personally, I feel like you should be willing to challenge yourself. I think that you should have books on your pull list or movies or TV shows or whatever it is that you like to consume that challenges the way that you think conventionally. Whatever you would typically think, this should challenge that. This should make you stretch your brain. There should be room for that inside of you. But if there is not, then avoid that shit. Don't read don't buy Jonathan Hickman comics if you don't want to be challenged by certain themes, for example.
It's that meme of that guy riding a bike and putting a stick in his own spokes, and then blaming somebody else. Like, no, you're doing it to yourself, dude. Like, read something else.
The last prong of this that I really want to tackle briefly is one of the comments that I always see whenever we talk about manga on this platform and the differences between manga and Western comics. And it always comes down to that Western comics are too woke and manga is not. And this is something that I really dislike because I'm not a reader of manga, but I do know about it in a broad sense. I know the big hits. I know Dragon Ball. I know Naruto. I know a bunch of these. And a lot of those are the same as superhero comics. They're not particularly different.
Cale, shonen, specifically manga, is almost inspired by Western comics. Am I right in that?
That could be fair to say.
And like it's also a just complete like if you're gonna tell me like stuff like Attack on Titan does not have political uh, undertones to it. Like, yes, the text is young protagonist fights giant monster. It's really cool looking, and it's fun to read. Sure, there's always subtext to that. There's subtext to like a Junji Ito, like even just a short story horror book. So it's another one of those things where people are just misunderstanding what they're talking about.
You're also maybe not even reading it in the original language. And you may not be able to pick up on the subtext because you're reading a translation or you don't know the political realities of the country that published the book that you're talking about. And I think there's just a lot of uncritical reading. And it's like your depth with manga is the biggest hits, and you're an American person and you don't know shit about Japanese culture, and you're saying it's not political when A, you haven't dug that deep, and B, you don't know what you're talking about. So the final thought here is, are comics too woke? No. Nothing is too woke. We should abolish that term outright. That should not be a part of your vocabulary. You should educate yourself and understand what it means, and then you would realize that it's silly to use. But the undercurrent of that, what you're really saying is that comics are too agenda based, too socio political, too progressive. All of those things are false. Comics have not meaningfully changed in that regard at all, I would argue. I would argue that there is politics all up and down Watchmen. There is politics present in Swamp Thing. You know, you find it all over the place through some of the times at which comics were the most prosperous. So miss me with the bullshit, but do leave me comments with your thoughts on this entire issue. Curate your own space so you are reading what you love, and then go on the internet and talk about it. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care, guys.